this on?
It's on. It's on.
Can't hear you though.
Yeah. I can turn volume up.
Okay. Better? 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 Okay. All right, well, with that I want to, first before, I want to add my name to the chorus of people who have been congratulating Anne and her husband who has been videoing this, and I understand that you were at the Canoe Club, Harry, to do Pete's re-performance. So thank you again for that. It's really great what you're doing. So with that, I want to introduce tonight's speaker, Carlton Skip Measley. Skip is a graduate of Hammonton High and of the Cumberland County College with a graduate degree in ornamental horticulture. But he actually went into horticulture, and so if anybody wants to do pick your own blueberries this summer, he has a 30-acre blueberry farm on Tiny Hollow Road. So anyways, Skip represents the Measley family, one of the original settlers of Hammonton, and he is the 5th generation, and his children, of course, the 6th, and he has great-grandchildren now, so he represents really seven generations of Hammonton Measleys. And it's been fun. I've been talking to him this last week. We talk all the time because besides a friend, he's a good customer. And every time, like with history, that I connect the dots with all that he has brought to me new. So with that, I introduce you to Skip Measley.
Hello, thank you. Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the history of the Measley family in Hammonton. In preparing for this night, we searched Ancestry.com, searched census records, went to the cemetery, looked at gravestones, and now we're even more confused than when we started. So let us try and unravel the history and make it more understandable for future generations that may view these tapes or check in our their ancestors. And it's a great service the Historical Society's doing, taping everybody from Hammonton and their histories with their families.
There's a lectern sometime, a lectern sometime.
There's many different ways we can went with interpreting the family tree. But what we're going to do is more or less look at our grandfather, great-great-grandfather, and grandfather. There's a lot more other Measleys, and they're spread around the country. And to get in touch with them and do an in-depth thing took probably a couple of years. So the first person we're going to talk about is my grandfather, Horace. And why I'm starting with him, well, he was the 3rd generation Measley. Well, I'm starting with him because he's the closest relative that we can reach out and understand more, because our parents can answer questions. Our parents took us to his house for anything. It's same with everybody's grandparents. We know their history through our parents. And they support, each generation supports the next one coming up. And everybody, can trade stories of even older generations, back them up. All right, let's see that. All right, Horace was 3rd generation, born in 1895 on Oak Road, died in 1993. He was the son of John and Frances. Lobdale was his mother's name, and he had sisters Mabel, Cora, Florence, and Leslie. He was married to Eva Archer. His children were Willard, Carl, Alice, and John. All right, he was born, raised on Oak Road. Most of the Measley families, that's where they resided, on Oak, Pine, Walker Road. Thank you. At 15, he worked at the Elvin store. I got a lot of information from a tape that they made, the Bicentennial Committee made about Hammonton characters. And he told a story how he worked for Elvin's, delivering farm goods, seeds, coal, anything for your house or farm, they had it. 15 years old, he was driving a couple horses and a wagon, making deliveries around Hammonton, Folsom, in different areas. Just to go to Folsom would take over a half a day to get there and back. You're only as fast as your mode of transportation.
Yeah.
Later on, he worked for a Mr. Slate. Now, names, if you go way back, nobody probably remembers a lot of different names. I believe he was a lawyer, very well-to-do lawyer, and his estate was on the Hammonton Lake. Later was the Calicerta property. So this is where the history began for that property, possible. Uncle John, he says he grew food and supplied the Slate estate on his farm at Inwood Farms. Now, I was looking at my father's, he also made a recording for Hammonton Historical Society, right? And I was looking through that, and he said he grew up on a small farm. He says it was actually a big garden. He had 6 or 8 cows and had a bull, and they raised 200 chickens for laying hens, and they also raised chickens for, to kill and sell for meat. They supplied the Slapes and a few other the neighbors would help them on the farm in trade for the different foods and vegetables that they had on the farm. So he grew like it would be your household market farm, but enough for enough for his family. And I guess he sold the eggs to other people and the chickens also. And my father says, I guess the guy really footing the bill was Mr. Slate. He wanted it that way, and whatever he wanted, he got. So that's just, I don't know the guy. That's about all I can glean from a couple sources. Do we have any more? Oh, yeah. So, Grandpa grew up on Oak Road, and he said it was a very interesting place. He used to tell stories of bootleggers, using that a lot. He never mentioned no names of who these bootleggers were, but his favorite story was when a gentleman named Mr. Burnhouse, I believe he was a highway department engineer, they would scrape the roads because the gravel would get so, rugged. And he says about, once the horses started down pulling the big scraper, they'd commence to wobbling because of all the liquor fumes coming out of the road. And he said they wanted to rent his barn to make moonshine and everything else, but he didn't want to have any parts of anything, barn burning down or anything like that. So it was an interesting place out on Oak Road. Inwood Farm is where he moved to, had the garden farm for this Mr. Slave's estate. It's where Golf Drive is now. Cotton Cios built the houses along there. There's nothing really left of the property. During the Great Depression, Mr. Slate lost his property, and Morris had an opportunity to buy it. On the property was the Nicholson house, which Samuel? No. George Washington. Nicholson, I'm sure a lot of people know, was a famous painter that painted a lot of New Jersey scenes. So somehow he became, after Mr. Slate lost his property. I guess he lost the farm, and my grandfather was able to buy it from him. And he fixed up the house, and that's where he lived the rest of his life. Well, soon after slaves left, Samuel Loveland bought that estate, and his father-in-law was Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith Jr. was the president of, might have been the first president.
People's Bank and Trust.
First People Bank and Trust.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived with Samuel Loveland, and his daughter was, his wife was his daughter. And Captain Loveland had a tugboat business on the Delaware River in Philadelphia. So Grandpa, he worked as a groundskeeper. He worked for the estate until it was sold. After that, he got hired by Ancora Estate as a groundskeeper. And I guess they just had built the Ancora Hospital, and they put him in charge of collecting shrubbery from the forest of the state park, the state forest, or any trees, natural trees and bushes. And I believe there was a prison or something there too, that he used to take them out on a bus in the woods, the prisoners, and they're the ones that would, work and dig up the trees and stuff. When I was probably 17 or 18, we took him out in my Jeep, and he showed us, all the way up to Lebanon State Forest through the woods where they used to take, go and do all these, excavate all these plants and bring them back to the hospital. After he relaxed, no, he never relaxed. He was always working. And he had, it says 5 acres. I think it was 13 acres. Well, he had that estate was 13 acres. He had five in grapes and a few blueberries. And my dad said in his interview that the blueberries that were planted there came from Elizabeth
White.
White from White's Bogs, that she started the whole blueberry in New Jersey industry. I can remember going up and down the White and Black Horse Pike. We'd fill up this 58 Ford truck with baskets of grapes and go to Harry's and Emma's and Rocky's, and oh man, there was like 15 different road stands from Hammonton to Atlantic City and back. And that was good times. I think I was just thinking today, I was probably getting babysitted, but I didn't even know. Who knows? I'm going to Grandpa's and driving the truck and stop at all these places. So he died peacefully at age 88 at his house, and he's buried in Oak Grove Cemetery. A few things else, back in these days, they were asking, what they did for fun, and well, it wasn't a lot of money, and he said mostly you woke up, you went to work, then you went to sleep, and you worked most every day, and big times you can, if you could get a ride on on a horse and buggy or somewhere, you could go visit your relatives, and that was about their spare time back in this era they had. So there was no cars, so you just worked. And all right, now we're going to go. This is where it all started. These are a couple pictures of ships. This is a sail, and this is they had steamships. Most were paddle ships, and these ships took a lot of immigrants over to America from Germany. They come from England. Mostly, they were called. I think they were called packet ships. They would have carry packages and stuff and mail and whatever. Had to go transatlantic. But they also had passenger. They had cabins on the top, on the first row. They had second class, little between deck kind of. And then they had steerage, which is, we don't have a picture of steerage, do we?
No.
Steerage was in the bottom, and they gave you a bag of food for the trip, and you had to cook it yourself somehow. And so it wasn't an easy trip. We're 4 to 6 weeks, depending, you know, how things go. Here's Bob. Hey, Bob. All right, Measley's first immigrant arrived in Hammonton from, Groeshockstetten. Groeshockstetten. He was there. He knows.
Skip, I wasn't there.
Oh, you weren't?
No, no.
It's just a rumor?
Bit of a rumor.
It's just a rumor. Sorry to get your hopes up. But we could trace our oranges back through our genealogy from the 1400s. At the time of immigration that Johann came over, it was less than 700 people. And this is about the area. This is Bern, which would be like Atlantic County, say, and Groeshockstetten would be like Hammonton, you know, like inside that county. So they made it all the way. They either went up to Germany or they made it all the way to England to you know, disembark to come to America. Where it was located, it was a market town. Just meant it was legal to hold markets there. Some family members visited this, and this was our name. In Switzerland, this was our name, how it was spelled. Most of the people that had visited there, they visited a farm, the farmhouse, so it's safe to assume that our relatives were also farmers in Switzerland. And I'm just thinking, in the 1850s there was France was in war and turmoil. Germany, Austria, they were just, you know, civil wars and everything going on. So it was probably a good time to take off for better pastures, so they say. Maybe that's why they had left. So this is Johann Frederick Measley, let's say. The records we found when he came to Hammonton, he changed his name to Frederick Measley. They dropped the Johann. His wife, he came with his wife Marie and his son Frederick. Later on, his family grew. He had Anna, Laura, Henry, David, Emma, John W., and Francis. Some names may be familiar to some of. This is the second generation. No, this is the first generation. So we are the second generation Hammonton. And he also had a farm. Now this is John W. Measley. This would have been Horace's father, second generation. He was born in Hammonton, and he's the son of Frederick. But he was 20 years younger than his brother Frederick. His sister Mabel, Cora, Florence, Warren, Leslie, which I found out is Lester Measley. He owned a 40-acre farm on Oak Road, and he sold it around 1915 to his cousin Lillian. And he moved with him and his daughters moved to Fairhaven, and he became a gardener. My grandfather Horace, he already had a family started stuff in Hammonton, so he stayed in Hammonton. The rest of his family moved to Fairhaven. And they buried John in 1941 in Hammonton. He's also in Oak Grove. Okay. This is my father. Now we're skipping Horace again because we already talked about him. This would be my dad. So here's the thing with, you know, about doing the history. Well, first, he was the son of Horace and Eva. He had Willard was, they call him William, Bill, Alice, and John. Uncle John, we're going to celebrate his 90th birthday in March. So another, he aged good. My dad stayed in Hammonton. Alice and John moved up to Fairhaven, Rumson, and Green Bank. I guess their aunts and uncles are up there. They had better jobs as far as they were teachers. So this generation, he was born in 1917, so he grew up through the Depression, Prohibition, World War II, atom bomb, the H-bomb, man on the moon, hippies. He loved the long hair on the men. 60s and 70s, what a time. And he even seen the beginning of computers, so it's a long life, but just think of everything that was compiled into that one. I'm sure, you know, we can add to that too. We've seen a lot of things accelerate, you know, from computers to TVs and, you know, just tons of stuff that we also seen, but you know, he practically went from 0 to 50 in 6 seconds in a lifetime. So much to be done. He worked at the shipyard during the war. And him and his dad and his mom, they pitched in and they bought 125 acres in down Piney Hollow Road. They cleared about 30 acres of the woods and wetlands. They planted blueberries, and a lot of the family members helped, and people from Winslow and local people really used to work in the summer. They used to work in the brickyards and come out and work. And kids came and worked for school clothes and everything else, and you know, everybody needed money, so they knew they had to work. So that's where they came. Farm's still going today. It's 75 years later, so we just celebrated 75th anniversary for the farm. He was a 50-year plus member of the Masonic Lodge in Hammonton. He also made the tape for the Historical Society. We talked about Hammonton in great detail. It was pretty interesting. I read it again today. What else we got here? I think that's it. Oh, no, that's it. And today was his 6th year that he passed away. It's kind of ironic, I guess. Let me see if I can pop this in.
Where is Fairhaven? You said they moved to Fairhaven?
Fairhaven, New Jersey. It's like Central Jersey, Rumson, Red Bank.
Yeah, further.
Central Jersey,
north.
Freehold.
Yeah.
Monmouth County.
Okay.
Man, you know.
Okay, while we're changing, I want to introduce a few people. To Sister Ann, who I claimed to have made those cookies, but was really Ann that I passed around. and then is this your daughter?
That's my daughter, Amanda.
Okay, daughter Amanda. And then we have what, cousin Bob here?
Yeah, I think I am on the second, third string somewhere in there.
Okay.
I don't know, Skip and I will figure it out someday.
A lot of people. Yeah. One of the interesting things about that, you know, in 1962, and the original oral histories were done, that Horace did it, and then when Sunday morning I always had breakfast at McDonald's, that And Skip's father was a very aggressive person, if he wanted to be. He said, you know what you ought to do? You ought to start doing oral histories, and you ought to start doing it right now. And so, thanks to him, and thanks to Ellen following up, that we have developed quite a history of that. So. Yes, and so she brought the copy with us.
And if anybody wants to sign up to be interviewed.
And if anybody that has not yet been interviewed, that wants to be, that.
What's got an apple?
Ellen's,
No. Use Windows?
Frank, here's a computer, guys.
You got it. How come my tape stopped playing?
You need to hit it with a bigger hammer.
That's my head.
Yeah. We put a CD in Janelle and.
That's the recording, I think, from. The tape?
No, you can use Eileen's tape.
Sue, call Kathy.
Oh, the virus?
Yes. Well, my security.
Right.
Tape one. Play.
After the meeting, that Skip has just maybe 5% of the Measley memorabilia to look at. Early on, he had the whole family's tree that spread out over a complete table. I don't know what happened to it, but from 1400 on.
There you go.
There we go.
Well, I don't know whether somebody stole it.
That looks like.
Okay,
It is.
Trustee,
Yeah,
thank you.
I think that'd be fun. Get a small
You ready to roll?
Yeah, this is just some 8mm of the farm. If not, you know, it's history, it's old stuff, and there's some they're gonna pick blueberries. Grandpop's on it, my dad's on it.
What year is this?
I couldn't tell you exactly. This is probably in the 50s. This picture right here. I'm looking at our buildings we have in the back. These are.
Who's on the tractor?
Yeah, first I thought it was.
My dad told me before I forget, but I don't know how to fast forward this. We don't really need to.
Yes,
To the right of the flag.
is that who's ours?
To the right of the flag is
To the right of the circle.
Well,
That's Paul's.
Yeah.
I've known him for years.
All right, we can watch that. Well, you know, I just want to. I try to put something together. You know, to make sense of keeping history going and everything. So, you know, this is where we started. We look back at our great-great-grandfather. We didn't know them. We didn't know their brothers or sisters.
Who's trimming?
Our grandfather, we had a lot of more knowledge because we had our parents to support that, you know, that stories that they had. It was closer to our generation. So here's the big thing. So, you know, will any of our great-great-grandkids remember us? Will they remember, you know, remember us, remember our brothers and sisters and our family? Because now they'll be us looking back, like we were looking back at our great-great-grandfathers.
Skip, can you explain why the dirt looks like snow?
Because it's
Not just the
sand.
lighting,
all
but it's
sand,
different.
It might have been flowers.
It's black, it's white on top, but it's black underneath.
It's like beach sand.
Oh, okay.
Is that Parker's fertilizer?
This is the best fertilizer in 1920, whatever. This tractor, my Uncle John, he just redid the whole tractor.
Is it a John
Oh,
Deere?
my God.
John Deere Model
Old
L.
LA.
Yeah, old deer.
There,
And
now that looks like snow.
This thing's still in the woods somewhere. It's not red no more though. Yeah, I just think it's the bushes. I mean, performance changed a lot. Now we
A lot
got,
of bluebirds in
this is
there.
probably 15 horsepower. Now we're using 50 and 80 horsepower tractor with cabs and everything. You can't get a good suntan with a cab. I believe that was one of his cousins, Homer Archer. I think that's who that was. So, Bob, did you want to say anything about any knowledge you have about the Measleys in Hammonton?
Well, I don't have a lot of
Talk
knowledge.
about the genealogy maybe and that kind of stuff? That you know.
Well,
This is Bob Measley. He's Frederick's son.
right. We could spend a couple hours on that, I mean.
There's a lot.
But I have to apologize for being late, but although I was born and raised in Hammonton, when I drive through, and after being away all my life, and I'm 88 years old now, so I've been away, things have changed. So I tried to get over here through the woods, and I made a wrong turn. Otherwise, I would have been here before you were here. But anyhow, we made it. And in my life, there's a lot of things. For instance, this building right here, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, my brother-in-law and sister were caretakers down here of the park and of this building. So of course I loved my sister, and in the summertime I would come down here all the time. And this is all changed now, but we went upstairs, it was up above, and the lifeguard, maybe you know the Barney Ritchie. Did you ever hear of Barney Ritchie?
Yeah.
Barney Ritchie was a real young guy, handsome, and all the girls, you know, they hung around him, you know. And he was one of the main attractions around here. And we had a little stand out there, with hot dogs, coats, and so forth. But that was one part of my life. The other part of the life was living on Oak Road, where our farms were. And my Aunt Lily married John Herrera. Probably heard of John, because he's long gone now. But they kept the farm going for many a year. And then John died, and then finally my aunt died, and we just, you know, just was sold, and that was it. Hammonton is a unique town. You know, we've lived all around. We've lived in Chicago and Pittsburgh and Grand Rapids, you name it, we've lived around. But this is a unique town. We have some friends that have come through here, and they really said, boy, that's a neat town. It must be a neat town to live in. And I said, well, it was when I lived here, but I haven't lived here for a long time. But my father, when he came over, Johann and Frederick, and I can remember my father saying that he was in the back of a horse plowing at 6 years old. And his father was about 5 years old when they came over, I believe, Johann's son, Frederick. And so then my father, of course, farmed, my Uncle Rover farmed, and my Aunt Lily farmed. So all three were right up on Oak Road. And it was really neat. If you ever saw that Waltons on TV, it was kind of like that. I mean, our house was here, and my grandmother's was here, and my uncle was over there, and it was all gravel road back then.
I know, what's
Okay.
up? Oh, okay, good. Now, there's a spot on this film that they had, I don't know if anybody remembers the old auction where they took the blueberries and strawberries.
Packing them down.
There's like a little clip it on there that, that's my dad right there.
That's his dad,
So keep an eye while we're listening. Sorry about that.
It's all on the wall.
Long time since I saw your dad. But other than that,
Around 1950, judging by that
the
quote.
family, when they came over in 1853, it was a long time ago. We went over to Switzerland and went into the town where all our relatives came from, in Großhochstelten. And we took 2 trains to get there. And when we got off of the train, in the train station, we knew where we wanted to go and who we wanted to see.
I still have
But
it.
nobody
And the
spoke
rubber- and the
English.
rubber.
So we were a little desperate there for a while until finally the train master that headed up the train station came out and spoke a little bit of English. So we told him who we wanted to see and where. We got on the phone, and pretty soon out comes this little red Opel car with this very robust woman and with a big smile on her face. And she represented the family who bought it from our family back in the 1800s. So they took us out to the chalet. It's a beautiful place. I should have brought up a picture of it. It's just beautiful. And we went in, and of course we couldn't understand each other, so we did a lot of sign language and smiling and pointing. And they said to sit down at the kitchen table, and they brought out the wine because all the people around there and the farmers would have wine made out of their apples and so forth. And we sat there, and they poured the libation and the cheese, and we ate the bread and so forth. And then he said to me, he said, he didn't say, he just pointed to the shot glass, which was about this high. And he poured both of them, and he went like this, and boom, boom, like this. So what did I do? I did the same thing, and then he poured the thing again, and mine, and both went boom, boom, boom. All I can say is, I'm glad I wasn't driving.
Did you say before you seen a picture of one of our ancestors in a church or?
Yeah, well, what that is, going back in the 1500s, you had these reformists, Christian reformists like Luther, Calvin, people like that. And this one ancestor, which dates back to 1468, he was a reformist, and he worked with Calvin, especially Calvin and Luther. My brother was over in Switzerland at one time, and he also made it out to the house, but he didn't get in the house like we did. So in the meantime, I had a nephew who retired, and he started doing the genealogy chart, and he traveled to Switzerland, he traveled all over with his genealogy. So he was in Bern, Switzerland in the museum, and he went in, and Measley is not our original name. There was about 4 or 5 different versions of it. M-U-S-C-U-L-U-S, Measley, and about 2 other versions. So Jimmy Jodum, my nephew, went in and said that he was looking for and wanted information on this ancestor. And the man that he talked to in the museum hopped up from the desk and he pointed up at the wall, and there was Wolfgang Measley up there in the museum in Bern, Switzerland. So it's kind of funny because when we go to church, I always tell the pastor, I said, be careful because I've got some influence here up there. We have a lot of fun, but that's about all I can contribute.
Yep.
That's very good, man.
Thank you.
Real well, like all Swiss men.
Uh-oh.
Well, I always always said.
Need a libation first?
Well, that would help. Yeah, we were on a bus over in Switzerland, and I said, gee, with all these Swiss, where's the yodelers in here? And there wasn't a single yodeler. So I went out one, yodeling, 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 and away we went.
All right, just like I'm saying, he's from the next older generation, and he remembers more stuff that we could all relate to, so that's it. I'd just like to thank the Historical Society for letting us to talk about the Measley family and our relationship to Hammonton, and like Bob said, it's a great town, and hopefully a few generations later they'll see us and know more about each family that settled here and still living here.
What are the photographs?
Oh.
What are your photographs on the table?
All right, this is what I was talking about. This is the old, what do you call it?
Auction block.
Hammonton.
It's about 1955, judging by that Ford that we
Yeah,
had.
the
How about
one
that
with the truck,
Chevy
yeah.
back there?
See the railroad
That'd be the
station and
broker.
everything.
Probably.
Where the brewery used to be.
Ford, that would have been
On
Paul's.
the side.
Is that? Yeah, that could be
That's the Red Baron.
All right.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You wanna know about the pictures?
Yeah, what are the photographs on the table?
This is my picture of my dad. I guess he had it painted when
Those
he
were all
was
cars.
probably pretty young.
Farmers run there with a horse and wagon.
This is
I remember
Morris and
David
his
Booth
sister
fell off
Mabel.
Fairview Avenue and the cops had to shoot him.
Oh, boy.
This is
That was only, could have been 7, 8.
Cecil Church, for my grandma Eva Archer. She, this is where they went. This is from 1909. It's a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Chu. Now, could have been any, Chu Road, Chu, or wasn't that
Yeah,
old settling family?
They got the grant from the king,
Yeah,
from two down and two roads.
Chu Town, yeah. Some other pictures. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. I got boxes of pictures, old pictures. Don't know who one person is. And so, if you got any pictures, put a name on it, even if you're guessing, because like 100 years, nobody will know. And, I think we're in trouble now because, like I have just a cassette tape alone, I couldn't listen to a recorder from 1977. And we were fortunate to have pictures. All right, now, who has a picture anymore? Show me your cell phone, show me your camera, you got the little disc. I mean, even computers don't have floppy disks anymore. I mean, they don't have CDs anymore. It's all the cloud, or you gotta put a flash drive in, or hook to another device. I mean, things keep changing, so who knows, like all our little devices 50 years from now, they might look at it like, how are we going to make this work? Or they might explode. We don't know what's going to happen. Deteriorate. So, I don't know what's going to happen or how we're going to keep track of everything's going on. So, that's it for me. Thanks again. I'd like to thank the Historical Society.
You got any questions for Skip?
No, that's very good.
Okay. Skip, on behalf of the Historical Society, and just a token of our appreciation. That's all. I think you know what that is.
It's like a blueberry.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Skip. Yeah.
Oh, and I'd like to thank my sister Ann, because she helped with PowerPoint and looking things up. I didn't do this all myself.
Okay, we got a 50-50.